America. It's a pretty touchy subject, but I think it's actually made worse by the idea that, as in America here, race is only seen by your skin color, and it exists in America. It is, and it happens, but I think it's also overblown. I think it's not overblown in the sense that it doesn't happen, but I think that the forms of racism, because take a look at this. It's like kind of like on the Tim Cat show. I watch that show every now and then, but one of the guys is named Bubba Hotep, not Bubba Hotep. What the heck? That one Hotep guy. Either way, he made a good point, and it's a point that even I was just thinking. I was just like, it's like the only time you hear about racism in America is literally just between blacks and whites, and even when let's say the latter decides to get in on it and say that they're experiencing racism, it's usually basically it's just like between those two groups, and but I think that the actual important thing about racism is the historical aspects, because that is, if we are going to say that race is real, then that means that everything that's happened up to this point has affected our reality with everyone and their race. So it's not trying to pull out like some like woke card and trying to pander that kind of talking point, but I mean, if it's the truth, then because it's also very hypocritical. A lot of these dudes too, like say like the border thing. I really don't care too much about the border too much anymore, because my views are the southern states, southwestern states. I still recognize that as Mexico. I don't really don't care. Say what you want, but it's just like, I mean, because this is the discourse, is that it's very, very, very disgenuine. Not genuine, because we have dudes in America here, especially like very much like the bordertarians, will say stuff like, "Oh yeah, conquered, not stolen," and it's like, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, bought fair and square, but these dudes don't know the history of anything. It's like they'll say conquered, not stolen, but it's like in the same, it's like they're not understanding. It's like when they're talking about immigrants, it's like, what happened to conquered, not stolen? They're not stealing land, they're not stealing jobs. And honestly, to this point, I really don't care. It's like, honestly, it's like if Mexican immigration into those southwestern states, it's just that land was recognized as Mexico before. That the deal with the president of Mexico at the time was literally a gun to his head, forcing him to sign a document, which I think was the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1847. I think I'm not too precise on it, but yeah, it's like this whole thing that it was bought fair and square. It's like, yeah, it's just kind of like a criminal steals from you fair and square by putting a gun to your head. That's fair and square, but it is what it is. But yeah, no, it's like race in this country is just like, especially like another example of this is the same dudes that'll say that this is like the least racist country, ever, yada yada yada. There's no racism in this country, like that Steven Crowder kind of like Ben Shapiro style of like shocktainment. So the least racist country, but in the same vein, they're basically saying that whites are the only ones that are being able to be targeted, which I'd agree to a certain degree. But yeah, it's like those two can't really exist. You can't say this is like the least racist country, and then say that whites are being the ones that are being singled out. And it's like, I believe that in the way the media portrays certain things, yeah, it seems like they would be skewing to that way, but who's the one that's doing it really? It's like, who's the one that's in charge of most of these institutions? Most of it's like who's the ones that are mostly saying it? It's like other white people. That's the thing too. It's just like, we need to stop with the discourse because of color. like I said, that's all we think about race is just skin color. So really, in reality, it confuses everybody because it just generalizes, and it is only just two groups that predominantly are in the race, you know, I don't know, the race arena. Because if you think about it, yeah, the only ones that really go by color are literally whites and blacks. And whites are not a monolith. Not every white person's the same. Probably there are some people that don't identify specifically with being white. There are Italians. They identify as being Italian. There are probably Nordic people that would probably, or Scandinavian people that prefer to be being called, Swedish or Norwegian. So this whole idea that it's just a general broad stroke, and it's trying to encapsulate everybody into this same identity, when in reality there is no such thing as the white race. It's just a bunch of different groups that for most of the time have never really gotten along, and now you're trying to link them up as if there's some. Same thing with blacks too. It's like blacks, not every black is the same. So it's like you have different ethnic groups, you have different tribes, people that speak different dialects, different languages, and yet everybody here in the West just literally just the moment that they see their skin, they just call them black, and I think that's very, it's like, and it's confusing too, because it's like it's already confusing with whites and blacks. Imagine just like if you called someone the brown race. There is no brown race. There's so many people that are brown. You have, Latinos, you have Mexicans, you have Salvadorians, but then you also have Filipinos. You also have Middle Easterners, Arabs. You also have, who was another person that can be considered? You have Indians. You have Indians that are very, very brown. You have Fijians. And to say, it would be stupid to say that there's the brown race. There's no such thing as the brown race. There's people that have certain skin tones, but it's just stupid. It's just stupid to think that we've gotten to this point where race is one of the biggest factors in this country, but we can't even get it right. You can't even get it right. You see skin color, it's like, oh, that's race, and it's like most of the time, a lot of people too, it's like, oh, this is racism, but you wanting to see what you want to see. So I think it is we live in a Burger King world. Have it your way, So that's what everybody's doing. I decide not to, I don't like the idea of calling people skin tone, colors. It's like, oh, this white person. I mean, unfortunately, that's the only way people understand things. Because if I say this person of European descent, they're going to be like, what the hell are you saying? Or this person of sub-Saharan, they're not going to get it, They're going to think that you're stupid, even though you're trying to take a more intellectual approach. So, race is pretty stupid in this country. It's overblown, and this is one of the byproducts of living in a melting pot which was brought on by European explorers and colonizers. But what are you gonna do? It's like, it's such a stupid thing. It's like you go to most other countries, it's like there's gonna be issues of race, maybe, but it's not to the point where it's like everyone's thinking about race. Like, I go to Mexico a lot, and really I don't stay long enough to see issues of race. I've only heard of certain things, like, there were certain stores that until like a certain year they barely started hiring certain people of type of complexion, darker skinned Mexicans, and that's unfortunate, but for the most part, most people, it's everybody there. I think it's more of a cultural thing. Everybody in Mexico is usually like not depending, but like for the most part, everyone there is happy to be Mexican. You can have people that have fairly like 99% European ancestry, from just like a Spaniard. But the culture is what matters. The nation that that they belong to is what matters. They're gonna be proud to be Mexican, even if they have like blonde hair, blue eyes, and which is a thing, And same thing, it's like I don't know. It's just we don't have that culture here because it wasn't really. You can say it was taught at one point, but here in the U.S., it's it's become a bad thing because in reality, what is it? What is the culture here? The culture that we have in the U.S. is just purely consumerism now. It's just capitalism. It's just alienating yourself to work to gain money, and right there, you forget everything about yourself. Even too, like the Christian aspect, the religious part of it. I think it's just all superficial and topical. I think a lot of people that go to church don't really care too much about the values that there's a lot of people that do, and I applaud them. If you're a Christian and you actually believe that in those Christian values, that's good for you. But a lot of people just go because that's just what you do, and I think that's part of the issue. They try to hold on to this idea of traditionalism, but I think a lot of conservatives are just liberals with a cowboy facade. They wear cowboy boots, or they do conservative things like drinking beer. But it's just all topical. It's an aesthetic that they adopt, and they claim to be traditionalists. But what are they mostly doing? They all have cell phones. They all drive nice new trucks, new cars. They all. I bet you a lot of conservative houses. They all have the amenities of this liberal social order. They all have AC. They all have toilets, and it's just. They're consumers just in the same way that most liberals are. We all are consumers at some point. It's just some dudes are just less likely to accept it and admit it. I don't know.